My name is Lisa Jaramillo, and I'm with the Oregon Water Resources Department, and I manage the Transfer and Conservation section. We're here this morning for the joint public meeting with the Oregon Water Resources Department and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to review the recommendation to consent to injury. Sorry about that. To review the recommendation to consent to injury on transfer application T-12837, and also to accept public comments on the recommendation. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Let's see. And I need to share my screen. Oops. Okay, here we go. All right, so in addition to me, you'll also be hearing from Danette Fossera with ODFW. She's their water policy coordinator, and Dwight French, administrator of the Water Rights Services Division at Water Resources, and he'll be facilitating the public comments portion of the meeting. I know from Water Resources, we also have Corey Corshane, he's the transfer caseworker. Jake Johnstone is the region manager, and Scott Siciliani is the local water master on the line. Today's meeting, as you know, is being held over Zoom, and as I mentioned before, it's also being recorded and live streamed. The purpose of today's meeting is to review the recommendation to consent to injury for transfer application T-12837, and we'll be accepting oral public comments on that recommendation. The public comments received on the recommendation, both written in response to public notice of that recommendation and those presented orally today, will be considered by ODFW. Following consideration of the comments, ODFW will notify the Water Resources Department whether it will withdraw or alter the recommendation. Then, based on that decision, the Oregon Water Resources Department will issue a preliminary determination proposing to either approve or deny the application. This is followed by a protest period within which anyone can protest the preliminary determination. No decisions will be made today, and there will not be a question and answer session. We're simply here to review the recommendation to consent to injury and to accept public comments on the recommendation. Also, as indicated in the notice of public meeting and agenda, only those that registered with OWRD by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, September 23rd, will be invited to provide public comments today. And because of the number of requests we received, you'll have 5 minutes to provide your comments. So this is our agenda today. In addition to introductions and scope, I'll provide a brief review of the transfer review and approval criteria and the transfer T-12837 itself. Danette will go over the ODFW evaluation on the consent to injury. Then we switched up the order a little bit. Item D will now be next steps and timeline. And item E will be the oral public comments, and after that we'll adjourn. OWRD evaluates transfer applications according to the review and approval criteria set forth in Oregon Revised Statutes 540.505 to .560 and Oregon Administrative Rules Chapter 690, Division 380. We've had several questions and comments related to injury and enlargement, so I'll briefly go over the criteria to hopefully provide some answers. The criteria for review and approval of a transfer are relatively narrow. The water right must be a water use subject to transfer, so it can't be a right that's been canceled. The water right must have been beneficially used within the past 5 years according to the terms and conditions of the right, or the applicant must demonstrate that it's not subject to forfeiture. The water user must be ready, willing, and able to use the full amount of water allowed under the right. In other words, they must have a system capable of diverting that full amount. The transfer cannot result in enlargement of the water right proposed for transfer. So you can't use a greater rate or duty of water than is currently allowed. You can't irrigate more acres. If it's a place of use change, the from lands, the location from which the water right is being moved must be dried up. If it's a point of diversion change, you can't divert more water at the new point of diversion than what is legally available at the original point of diversion. And when evaluating character of use changes, it's likely that conditions will be added to ensure that the amount of water used under the new use will not exceed the amount of water that could have been used under the existing right had that use been maximized. The transfer cannot result in injury to any other existing water right, including in-stream water rights. And injury occurs when a proposed transfer would result in another existing water right not receiving previously available water to which it's legally entitled. And then finally, all other application requirements have to be met, such as the proposed use must be compatible with local comprehensive land use plans. Now a quick refresher on the transfer application. T-12837 was received on February 2nd, 2018. It was submitted by Andreas and Carol Bleck. And the water right to be modified under the transfer is Certificate 3943. The transfer proposes to modify the entirety of Certificate 3943, which is 0.81 CFS of water from Grave Creek for irrigation of 65 acres with a priority date of June 23rd, 1919. T-12837 proposes to move the authorized point of diversion upstream approximately 560 feet on Grave Creek. It also proposes to change the place of use of 1 acre of irrigation and to change the place of use and character of use for the remaining 64 acres of irrigation to mining uses. OWRD published public notice of receipt of transfer T-12837 on February 13th, 2018. 24 timely comments were received in response to the public notice. However, not all of the issues raised by the commenters address the criteria for review and approval of a transfer application. Again, the criteria set forth in statute and rule are relatively narrow. The water right being transferred has to be a water use subject to transfer. It must have been used within the last 5 years, or they must demonstrate that it's not subject to forfeiture. They have to be ready, willing, and able to use the water. No enlargement, no injury, and all other requirements like land use must be met. So OWRD's evaluation of the application, including consideration of comments received, resulted in the determination that the proposed transfer would injure in-stream water rights certificate 72697. The applicants notified Water Resources that they wish to pursue the consent to injury process. So on June 14th, 2018, Water Resources submitted a request to ODFW for a recommendation on whether we should consent to the injury to the in-stream water right that would occur as a result of the transfer. Then on December 20th, 2019, the department received a recommendation from ODFW to consent to the injury, and Water Resources published receipt of the recommendation on our weekly public notice dated May 26, 2020. In response, we received 14 written comments, most of which requested a public meeting on the consent to injury recommendation. So that brings us to this point in time. The most recent OWRD action on T-12837 was a preliminary determination which was withdrawn on June 24th, 2020. The next step will be issuance of a new preliminary determination after ODFW considers all of the public comments on the recommendation and then notifies us of their decision. I'll provide some more detail on the next steps a little later, but now I'm going to hand things over to Danette with ODFW. And okay.
There we go. The mute will get you every time. Good morning, everyone. My name is Danette Becerra, and I am the Water Policy Coordinator with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Today, I will be reviewing our process that we use to make recommendations to the Water Resources Department regarding consenting to injury of in-stream water rights for aquatic life. But first, I wanted to introduce colleagues on the phone with me today. We have Dan Van Dyke, who is our Rogue District Fish Biologist, and Anna Packenham Stevenson, who is our Water Program Manager in Salem. We are all here today to listen and hear your concerns. We are open to this public process. And I want to let you know that while you're speaking, I will be taking notes, and ODFW will review both the written and oral testimony and comments in the coming weeks to see if we learn anything that we had not previously considered in our assessment. We'll then make a decision on if we want to maintain or withdraw our recommendation to Water Resources or potentially alter it in any way. So the topics I wanted to cover today, I want to go over some of the common concerns that were posed in your written comments. I will discuss our role in the consent to injury process and go over the policies that we utilize to make our assessment. We'll talk about specifics of the transfer, the existing conditions in Grave Creek, and the potential impacts of the transfer. We'll talk about the mitigation proposed in detail, as well as the monitoring component. And then I will let you know how we used all of this information to make our recommendation to Water Resources. So I wanted to start with the written comments. I did want to let you know that I read through all of them and I heard your concerns, and I'm going to attempt to address some of those today. There were definitely some common themes in your comments, and the first of those being that you recognize that Water Resources is the trustee and the one responsible for protecting in-stream water rights. So a lot of you were uncertain as to ODFW's role in the process. A lot of you talked about the value of Grave Creek. You recognize that it's identified as a Class 1 stream. Our recovery plans identify it as having high intrinsic potential, and it's a stream in the highest need of flow restoration. You did recognize the in-stream flow component and its importance. You told us that the in-stream flow targets have not been met for many years in Grave Creek, and you were concerned that we did not address those stream flows in our evaluation. Therefore, you felt that the mitigation was inadequate because we did not address stream flow. And you said that we failed to establish how the mitigation actions are adequate to compensate for that loss of flow. You told us that the mitigation does not yield an in-kind replacement of flow and doesn't meet the net benefit standard. And then a lot of you had general concerns with the project as a whole and were concerned that it was going to harm fish and wildlife. So why is ODFW involved in this process? Basically, the statutes that talk about consent to injury direct us to weigh in on the injury component. And that is specifically limited to the change in point of diversion. The statute says that the agency that requested the in-stream water rate, which is ODFW in this instance, may recommend to water resources that they consent to the change, but we can only make that recommendation if the change will result in a net benefit to the resource that is consistent with the purposes of the in-stream water right. So I wanted to give you just a quick overview of in-stream water rights. The In-Stream Water Right Act of 1987 allowed ODFW to apply for in-stream water rights, and we have a history of applying for them across the state. The goal for ODFW in applying for these in-stream water rights is outlined both in statute and rule, and that goal is to conserve, maintain, and enhance aquatic and fish life, wildlife, and fish and wildlife habitat. Today, we will be talking specifically about the in-stream water right in Grave Creek, which covers the reach from Boulder Creek to Wolf Creek. So now you know why ODFW is involved in the process, so I'll tell you a little bit about the assessment that we conduct. ODFW has an internal policy for fish and wildlife habitat mitigation that is outlined in our rules, so it's something that we have to use. The policy provides consistent goals and standards to mitigate impacts to fish and wildlife habitat that are caused by both land and water development actions. And it's there basically to guide our staff in providing recommendations to other agencies on regulatory processes. Within the policy, we have 6 main categories of habitat that are based on the value of that habitat to fish and wildlife. And each of those categories has their own set of mitigation goals. For the consent to injury process, ODFW uses that policy to identify habitat categories and the associated goals. We provide that information to the applicant, and the applicant then produces a mitigation proposal. We will then review that proposal for consistency with the mitigation policy. It's important to note that for the consent to injury process specifically, that mitigation can be either in the form of water, habitat restoration, or potentially a combination of both of those, depending on the habitat category that's identified for the impacted reach. For this transfer, we used our policy to determine that it will reduce or degrade essential but not limited habitat, mostly for spawning, rearing, and or migration. And this classifies it as our habitat category 3. The mitigation goals for category 3 habitat are no net loss of either habitat quantity or quality through reliable in-kind and in-proximity mitigation. Our habitat policy does define the in-kind habitat mitigation as something recreating similar habitat structure and function to that that's existing prior to the action. What this means is that the mitigation needs to provide habitat of the same quantity and quality that may be harmed by the proposed action to meet the biological requirements of the same population that's affected by the action. This can be done through replacing, restoring, or enhancing in-stream flow or other habitat features. And then in addition to our internal policy, the transfer statutes require a net benefit for all of these consent to injuries. So once we've identified the habitat category and goals, we need to apply it to the specific transfer. So we looked at this proposed change in point of diversion. And in this case, there was 0.81 CFS from an existing certificate that was going to be moved upstream about 560 feet on Grave Creek. It's the 2 green dots on those mapped there on the side. The period of use on the existing certificate is April through November. So to begin our assessment, we start by looking at what species are present during that time period, April to November. In Grave Creek, the primary species are fall chinook, coho, summer and winter steelhead, and Pacific lamprey. We next needed to look at the habitat, and we conducted a site visit to better understand the existing habitat conditions within that injured reach. So in this case, we were looking specifically at the 560 feet and the 0.81 CFS moving upstream for the quantity of habitat being impacted. And we took a look at the quality on our site visits, and the existing habitat is currently not that great in this 560-foot reach. It is a really straightened channel, as you can see in the photos there. It has really no structural complexity. So when we're looking at in-kind habitat replacement, we have to look at that structure and function. So we needed to know what we had to start with. The structure of this reach consists of small boulders and cobble as the primary substrate. There's really no large wood within the system, and there's only one lateral scour pool that provides really the only quality habitat for rearing fish within this reach. As it is, this reach is functioning as primarily rearing habitat for coho, summer steelhead, and Pacific lamprey. And there is very limited spawning habitat. There is a little bit within the reach and some within proximity to the reach. And then we have adult and juvenile migration through the reach year round. So impacts to fish from this reduction in flow within the reach. We're looking mostly at a reduction in depth from moving that water upstream, and this will result in less foraging and edge and refuge habitat for juvenile fish. The water quality impacts that we considered included primarily a potential increase in temperature from this reduction in flow. So we provided all this information to the applicant, and we coordinated with them a lot on the proposed mitigation plan. There was lots of back and forth until we reached agreement on what was acceptable. The mitigation plan consists of 4 major actions. The first action is around placement of large wood structures within the impacted reach here, and there were 4 locations that were selected for these structures. The picture there on the right-hand side of the screen shows kind of a design phase of what they will look like within the stream system. These structures will be monitored for a period of 25 years. And once they are installed, they will provide an immediate increase in rearing habitat by improving stream complexity and providing cover for fish in the system. And the large wood complexes will also trap stream bed materials and gravel, create pools, and improve spawning habitat, which is an added benefit. By combining these structures with the setbacks and protection of the riparian area that's already required through other processes, this will allow the riparian area to naturally contribute future habitat beyond the lifespan of these structures because they won't last in the system forever. And this will result in improved habitat for the life of the project. This action overall will increase fish productivity and abundance. The second action is around these depressions that are within the floodplain, referred to as coyote holes. There are 2 of them currently within the floodplain that are potentially trapping fish and stranding them at high flows. This results in increased predation and mortality on these fish. By filling these and sealing them with fine sediments, this will reduce the fish stranding and mortality, and the action will result in increased fish abundance. The third action is centered around the existing point of diversion. There is currently a rock dam. It's a partial barrier to fish passage at low flows, and the associated intake channel that is potentially stranding fish again at high flows, which leads to their predation and mortality. So by removing the push-up dam and recontouring the associated intake channel, this will provide volitional fish passage at all flows throughout all seasons and throughout the year, and will eliminate fish stranding. and this will aid in distribution and increase fish abundance. The last action is involved with the riparian area. There's going to be some removal of invasive vegetation that's currently on site, and those will be replaced by native riparian plants. It's important to note that this is in addition to those requirements for mitigation under other county, OWRD, and other agency requirements. And then there was this additional area within the floodplain that somehow was not already covered. That bottom picture there with the red circle shows the area that we added to this plan as additional protection. Healthy riparian areas will naturally contribute to fish habitat over time. It will improve shading and curtail warming of the stream, which is really vital to maintaining the cooler water temperatures that are essential for the species within Grave Creek. This action will increase productivity and fish abundance. There is also a monitoring component associated with the plan. This is to ensure that the mitigation will function as intended in the plan. ODFW will be on site immediately following implementation to ensure compliance with the plan components. And at that same time, there will be an initial report that will establish the baseline conditions. And then there's going to be annual monitoring and a reporting schedule for the period of 25 years. This is to ensure that we achieve project success and we can identify any corrective measures needed along the way if things aren't functioning as they should be. Success for the project will be determined at the end of 5 years for the riparian planting portion. So for those new plants going in, they'll have to have an 80% survival rate. And project success will be identified as a whole at the end of 25 years, looking at those improved habitat components. Success will be in the form of actively improving the habitat through those large wood complexes, and then passively allowing the protected riparian area to naturally contribute to in-stream habitat. So we'll need to see improved habitat throughout the 25 years and for sure having it maintained at that 25-year mark. So we took all of this information and we considered the proposed actions. Again, that was improved stream complexity, the increase in foraging and refuge habitat, the reduction of stranding and mortality, and the improved riparian conditions. And after consideration, ODFW found that the adverse impacts to aquatic life caused by this transfer and the reduction of flow will be offset by an in-kind and in-proximity increase in similar types of fish habitat. We determined that this mitigation offsets the injury and meets our no net loss standard for habitat category 3 habitat. We also determined that the net benefit is achieved because the mitigation is providing year-round benefits and benefits that will increase over time. Therefore, we found that the transfer increases fish habitat similar to that impacted. It benefits species present within proximity to the injury, and it results in a net benefit to the resource. We determined that the overall benefit to the resource provided by the mitigation actions is consistent with the purpose of the in-stream water right because it provides improved habitat conditions for a multitude of species and their life history needs. This also fulfills the overarching goal of the in-stream water rights outlined in statute and rule that we discussed earlier. And again, that's to conserve, maintain, and enhance aquatic and fish life, wildlife, and fish and wildlife habitat. So taking all of this into account, in the end, ODFW recommended that water resources allow the change in the point of diversion. So that's what I have for you today. I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Okay, there, I got the mute off. Okay, so I wanted to just focus a little bit on what the next steps are following this joint public meeting. So ODFW will review the public comments to determine whether their recommendation to consent to injury on transfer T-12837 should be, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry about that. So ODFW is going to be evaluating all of the recommendations to determine whether or not they need to be withdrawn, altered, or not withdrawn. Then once that decision is made, ODFW will notify the Water Resources Department of their decision. Based upon that decision, OWRD will then issue a new preliminary determination to either approve or deny transfer T-12837. And then following issuance of the new preliminary determination, we'll do a public notice of that preliminary determination, and that's published in our weekly public notice and in the newspaper. The protest period is initiated upon publication of the public notice, and it ends 30 days after the date of our department's public notice, or 30 days after the last date of publication in the newspaper, whichever is later. So the protest period spans 30 to 45 days. If timely protests are filed, OWRD may seek resolution through a settlement agreement or a contested case hearing. So time on that is unknown at this time. If protests are not filed, then a final order consistent with the new preliminary determination will be issued. This is followed by a 60-day period in which reconsideration requests may be filed. So with that, we've given you the information that we have today, and now we would like to hear what you all have to say. So at this time, we are seeking and accepting public comments on the recommendation to consent to injury to an in-stream water right for transfer T-12837. Only those that pre-registered will be invited to provide comment today. When it's your turn to provide comments, Dwight French will call your name. And because of the number of requests to participate today, you will have 5 minutes to provide your comments. Your time will start when your name is called. Dwight will give you a 30-second warning when you reach the 4.5-minute mark. So when you hear that, you'll have 30 seconds to wrap it up. If you have not completed your comment within the allotted time, you will be muted and we will move on to the next commenter. And if you did not pre-register, we won't be able to accept your comment today. However, upon issuance of the new preliminary determination on T-12837, you will have an opportunity to file a protest during the protest period that follows. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Dwight.
All right. So this is Dwight. Lisa's going to turn off her mic. All right. And just click the microphone. There you go. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Danette, for all of your words and information. So I've got a list of 23 different folks. There were a couple instances where a couple folks signed up together. So I've I've split you so that you'll have 5 minutes each. I'm going to read through the names so you have an idea of when you'll be called to testify, so you're not completely flat-footed. You can have an idea of when your name is coming up. And when I get done with the instructions or going over that, I'm going to ask Deirdre Dooley, who's helping us with this Zoom call, just to make sure that, just to see if she has any other questions before we get started. Okay, on my list, I have Lisa Brown first, then Deborah Clapp, then Steve Clapp, number 4, Deborah Lawwill, number 5, Steve Lawwill, then Rick Foster, Diane Getchell, Greg Getchell, number 9 is Elizabeth Howard, number 10 is Andreas Bleck, number 11, Dale Johnson, then Steve Roos, George Baxter, Richard Emmons, then William Corcoran and Elizabeth Corcoran, number 17, Cindy Henry, number 18, Joe Boyer, then Carolyn McNamara, then Steve McNamara, then at number 21, Nancy Rodine, and followed by Jim Rodine, and number 23, Lisa, I'm not sure if that's Bo or Bowie. So I apologize if I've mispronounced any of your names, but that's the order. And when I call your name, I'll start my timer on my phone. And like Lisa mentioned, when there's 30 seconds to go, when you have 30 seconds left, I'll give you a reminder. And at 5 minutes, I'll thank you for your comments. Deirdre will mute you and I'll call the next name. So thank you in advance for all of your comments that you'll be making today. All right, so let's get started. First on the list, Lisa Brown. Oh, one more thing, Lisa, I'll restart the timer for you. Just when I call your name, if you would introduce yourself for the recorded record, we would appreciate that. All right, so Lisa Brown, go ahead, please.
For the record, my name is Lisa Brown. I am a staff attorney with Water Watch of Oregon. I want to thank
Lisa, I can't hear you yet, so I haven't started your time. I want to make sure you're off mute. And Deirdre, I didn't ask any questions, but I didn't ask you if you have any questions before we start. But I see Lisa's picture up there, and so I'm guessing.
And she is unmuted.
Am I unmuted?
So Lisa,
you're unmuted.
Please go ahead.
Okay. For the record, Lisa Brown, I'm a staff attorney with Water Watch of Oregon.
I still can't hear you, Lisa. I wonder, Deirdre, do you know why we might be having a problem hearing Lisa's audio?
I'm not sure. I hear her.
Dwight, this is Jake. I hear her as well.
Okay. So Danette gave us the thumbs up, so maybe she can hear. I'll tell you, I know what the problem might be. Let's check. Maybe we have is it possible we have our mics turned down so we didn't have any feedback? Okay, I haven't, don't worry, Lisa, I haven't started your timer yet. I gotta click over to the, there we go. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right, So now I think we're really ready to get started. Thanks for your patience, Lisa.
Sure.
And let's go ahead.
All right, my name is Lisa Brown. I'm a staff attorney with Water Watch of Oregon. I want to thank the Department of Water Resources and ODFW for organizing this meeting, for the presentations, and for the opportunity to comment. I plan to highlight and expand on 2 points from my written comments and raise 2 additional points. First, the consent to injury statute requires that any change result in a continued net benefit to the resource consistent with the purpose of the in-stream water right. We think that the language of this particular in-stream water right certificate requires a net benefit to stream flow, which the recommended package does not provide. Even if mitigation other than stream flow mitigation were legal, the proposed mitigation package is inadequate here, where the state classifies the stream as being in the highest need of flow restoration. We just don't believe that under these conditions that the proposed mitigation package provides the similar habitat and function that will be lost from the loss of stream flow. Second, the proposed POD here is the same POD as for applicants' reservoirs R15319 and 15320. Those reservoir permits require liners that to our knowledge have not been installed. And without conceding that it would be legal to ever store water from this proposed transfer in those reservoirs, we think clearly that any transfer must also include those reservoir lining requirements, given the shared POD and the lay of the land. And I don't have time to get into WRD's voluminous record on why those liners are required to prevent injury to the in-stream water right from groundwater intrusion into the reservoirs, but I would refer folks to the files for application G17580, limited license 1484, and permits R15319 and 15320, and also Water Watch's petition for reconsideration on permits R15228 and 230, which details a lot of this record. We think that failure to require liners here would basically endorse an end run around the liners that WRD has already determined are necessary to avoid injury to the in-stream water right. Third, we also think that there are several water quality problems associated with the change of POD, not to mention the mining, that I don't have time to get into the details of, but a few central areas include water quality, existing water quality problems that would be exacerbated by the flow reduction we don't believe are addressed in the mitigation package. And second, water quality problems, including temperature, sediment, and other contaminants from any return flows as a result of this change of POD. And I know some of the local people can provide more detail on those water quality issues. Finally, I want to touch on the proposed change to mining use and just note that although this is titled a public meeting regarding consent to injury for transfer application T-12837, ODFW's recommendation, of course, only pertains to the change in POD. It does not recommend consent to injury from the change to mining, for example, from the loss of return flows from the irrigation, which will injure the in-stream water right well beyond the reach affected by this change in POD. So I just want to be clear that ODFW has not consented to injury from any change to the mining use. And that's all I have. So I just thank you again for the opportunity to comment and for organizing a public meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. That was about, you saved us about 30 seconds of time there. Let's see, and now I got to turn off my phone and so I can restart. Okay. Next on the list, Deborah Clapp, and then Steve Clapp after that. So Deborah, please go ahead. Thank you. Can't hear anything yet.
Is Deborah on the same line as Steve?
I'm not sure, 5258 or 5257.
Yeah, I'm asking Steve to unmute and he hasn't. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Hi, my name is Deborah Clapp. They said on my phone they didn't hear me.
Yes.
I did. They said, can you hear me now? Hi, my name is Deborah Clapp. My husband and I live at 158 Daisy Mine Road. Our property is about 500 feet from Mr. Bleck's property. And I concur with everyone else that we don't want Grave Creek manipulated or destroyed. Grave Creek is already endangered, under immense stress. Please remember, Sunny Valley is made up of many wonderful homes and families, not just one man with a gravel pit dream. I thank you for your time.
This is Steve Clapp.
I didn't call you yet.
Oh, sorry.
They're probably giving me the 5 minutes.
Hello. This is Steve Clapp. Okay. My wife and I moved to Sunny Valley 16 years ago. The first order of business was to drill a well. It took 2 attempts to get a low yield well. Then 3 years ago, our well dried up and we had to drill another well. Once again, 2 attempts, 1 low yield well. We also found out some of our neighbors were also having to drill new wells. We live approximately 500 feet from Andreas Bleck's gravel pit project. It is close enough that I can see and hear his heavy equipment and water trucks moving around. 10 years ago, when the residents of Sunny Valley learned of Mr. Bleck's gravel pit project, we became very alarmed. We all know how precious our water is. So when we found out in Mr. Bleck's own proposal for the gravel pit, that he would be using millions and millions of gallons of water, we were shocked. The residents of Sunny Valley do not want Mr. Bleck manipulating or compromising Grave Creek, the water table, or the underground aquifer. My wife and I know firsthand what it is like not to have water. It is devastating. I've heard from more than one neighbor you can't drink gravel. Please keep all of us in mind when you are weighing a decision. Also, please remember, Grave Creek is a treasure to the people of Sunny Valley. It is also a treasure to the wildlife of Sunny Valley. Please don't let one man manipulate or compromise this treasure. Thank you very much. Grave Creek is a treasure.
Dwight, you're still muted.
Thank you for that. Okay, next up is Deborah Lawwill, followed by Steve Lawwill. So Deborah, please go ahead.
Good morning, Deborah Lawwill, President of Friends of Country Living, representing its mission to improve and protect the livability of rural communities. I also speak for many residents and concerned advocates who could not join this meeting today due to conflicts in their schedule. We recognize the difficult issues you must balance in this decision process. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to help you. Water is the grassroots of the livability of any community, rural or urban. If there is not an absolute certainty that this transfer will not result in a loss of stream flow, you must err on the side of denying it. As an agricultural permit, it will not benefit Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel because their interest is not in agriculture. As a mining permit, it will not benefit the watershed. Your responsibility is first to the habitat, not the needs of the applicant. After numerous hearings, commissioners approved a land use permit conditioned by 42 requirements. Before the vote was called, Commissioner Heck addressed the chairman with a statement that has been echoed by many. You can live without rock, but you can't live without water. His vote in favor of the decision was cast only after he was assured by the chairman that OWRD and ODFW would be responsible to assure that Grave Creek and the People's Wells would not be negatively impacted. As the president of Friends of Country Living, I have tried to demonstrate to our board that we cannot be complainers without solutions to those complaints. 2 years ago, we reached out to Brian Barr of the Rogue River Watershed Basin to take steps towards revitalizing and restoring the project on Grave Creek that had been recommended by the BLM as a critically endangered stream. Jonas Parker, BLM biologist, came on board with excitement to encourage the project. But our board felt that putting this effort into Grave Creek with a quarry waiting to exploit it would be like asking the little Dutch boy to put his finger in the dike. ORD's mission statement is to serve the public by practicing and promoting responsible water management through two key goals: to directly address Oregon's water supply needs and to restore and protect stream flows and watershed in order to ensure the long-term sustainability of Oregon's ecosystems, economy, and quality of life. ODF's mission statement is to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations. Friends of Country Living's message is to improve. Excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous. All of our mission statements have a common thread: to improve the livability and quality of life for Oregonians and future generations. You now are going to be able to see the bigger picture of what we are concerned about and what we have tried to present to you. Please consider the responsibility the Josephine County Commissioners passed to you and the hope we have in you to do what's best for the most people by reversing your consent to injury. Thank you for letting me speak.
All right, thank you, Deborah. Next on the list is Steve Lawwill, followed by Rick Foster. So take it away, Steve.
Can you hear me? This is Steve Lawwill.
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Your time starts now. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Steve Lawwill, and my home is within 1,500 feet of Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel. And I want to start off by asking two questions of Fish and Game. Something Lisa Brown said, that Fish and Game did not consent to the change of use to mining. And I would like to have them address the issue specifically as to whether or not they did consider the change of use and not just a change of POD.
So, Mr. Steve, before you go any further, I want to let you know that this is not a question and answer format. We're here to receive your comments.
But will they consider that question? I know they're not going to answer it now.
Okay.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Please continue.
All right. My second question for Fish and Game is they specifically talked about current problems at the current POD that exist on Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel. And my question for them is that could they not force those POD issues to be corrected under current law and rules? Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a comment, and I want to say that addressing the change of use is that by definition, the change of water's use from agriculture to mining will change its pattern of use. Summertime irrigation of crops will become continuous wash water for rocks. Also to consider with the mining use is that Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel project specifically proposes to dig 109 acres of pits along immediately adjacent to Grave Creek, and each pit will be up to 90 feet deep. That will leave 8 reservoir pits along the creek that will be subject to 11 million cubic feet of annual evaporation, and that will go on forever. We haven't received as residents any protection or assurances regarding our water supplies, and I don't think Fish and Game is giving the protection to fish the way they should. So I respectfully disagree with Fish and Game's consideration of this water transfer as being beneficial, and I think it should be rejected. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next on the list is Rick Foster, followed by number 7 is Diane Getchell. So Rick, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Excuse me, this is Rick Foster. Am I coming in okay? I'm having to use the speaker on my phone because of my hearing problem.
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, very good. Just to start off with a real quick introduction, I live directly across from where the proposed gold mine's going in. And please note, I have never met and I do not know the owner. And I have absolutely no ill feelings towards him. All I've heard is that he has very deep pockets and a person that does his own thing. And so I have a few concerns here. I do have about 8 or 9 pages that I mailed up there. I'm a retired science teacher of about 40 years. And at times I've worked very close with the fish and wildlife. And I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that this project's even being considered. There's a lot of people in the area of this proposed gold mine. And this is what I would call a rural high-density population. This is not a mine that's going up in the mountains with nobody around. And its impact is going to be felt by the people. It's going to be a great increase in noise. We already have noise occasionally coming from over there. The truck traffic, impact on the flora, fauna, air quality, all this in a place that can't really receive this kind of high-use area. I call it a gold mine because that's basically what's happening. I have a very good friend that bumped into a couple of the employees, and he asked, "You guys finding any color?" And they kind of looked at him, and they kind of said, "Well, yeah, there's a little bit of color showing up." So I just really question this whole project big time. And how about the impact on the water, which a few other people have talked about? I'm very concerned about the groundwater. Groundwater tables are very complicated, and what you think is going to work and you put on some paper is not going to pan through. I don't know how many soil strata samples you've taken. I don't know how closely you've looked at all the water tables and different flows underground, but this is going to greatly impact all that. And then I'm actually kind of surprised that the Native people aren't going nuts over this, because the little bit of research that I've been told is that this was a very, very unique and special area to them. So I kind of question that. And then I have this question. Once everything's operational, do you understand there's no going back? The negative impact that is going to affect the water, animals, wildlife, plant life and all that. Your project sounds very good on paper, but once it's actually formulated and going, who's going to be the one that cleans up the problems that happen? It's my understanding that the owner doesn't live here, so he has no buy-in what happens in Sunny Valley when everything goes haywire. I have a real problem with that. Finally, I would just like to comment saying, simply put, this area is just a wrong site for this gold mine. Yes, there's gold here, but it's not worth tearing up the beautiful area for which, you know, for a little bit of a few dollars. And just, you need to look at the really, really big picture. And I know one thing for sure, is I would not want my name on the permits with probably the class action lawsuits that'll come forth when things go belly up. So thank you for your time. This is Rick Foster.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Next on the list is Diane Getchell, followed by number 8, Greg Getchell.
This is Diane Getchell. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Diane, could you start over, please? When you first introduced yourself, I could hear you fine, and then you're breaking up and you're really not coming through.
Can you hear me better now? My volume's up.
Yeah, that sounds good. Please start over if you would, please. Thank you.
I have to hold it. I'm shy. Okay. This might be a little disjointed because you brought up comments or information that I didn't have before I did my comments. So bear with me. Back on October 19, 2012, per an AP article in the paper up in Salem, they presented they were writing about a permit that was denied, that was denied based on pretty much the exact same thing back in 2012 that we are discussing today. It had to do with injury to the creek. It had to do with some of the warming of the water that went into the habitat, things that were no longer, or that would be damaged with an injury, coming across as an injury to the creek. Fast forward how many years, and we are discussing the same thing. However, you present this huge project where you're going to build 4 different areas and re-enhance or enhance to help this injury be mitigated. So you've already acknowledged that there's going to be a problem. Now you're going to intervene and make the creek better. Things that already need to be improved. So my question is, who funds this? All this work, and who's covering the cost of this project in behalf of giving this person or this entity the ability to mine or into the creek? So that means what part does the state play, or does the county play, and who does this kind of work, and who pays for the monitoring for 25 years? The next point I'd like to make is they do not have a mining permit. So I feel like this is almost preempted to where they're not working on the 42 conditions that would then make a mining use of water be or justify this, as opposed to this is all going to be done, and they may not even end up being permitted. So I'd like to know what, or maybe this needs to be tabled, or whether I would like to see it disapproved. I think nothing has changed.
Diana, I wonder if you've moved away from your microphone because you're breaking up again.
It's just not good. Anyway, I just found out across the street from us directly just recently in the last month or so, another well has gone dry. So we already have issues established that when this project takes effect, will accelerate or only enhance the negative. And if this doesn't more or less support the community and the help this creek, and that we're talking about how we can make an injury be a little okay or a lot okay, then I think we're going down the wrong path. Thank you for your time.
This is Greg Getchell. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Greg, is this Greg Getchell? And after Greg is Elizabeth Howard. So Greg, if this is you, please introduce yourself and continue. Thank you.
Hey, this is Greg Getchell, and I live on Placer Road, very close to where the proposed mine site is going in. I have something just very simple to say. I've looked at all the photographs and the drawings and the proposal from Fish and Game, and it looks like it's an unbelievable environmental study that's been done, and it will greatly help the creek. Unfortunately, I have a series of pictures at home where the applicant has certainly abused Grave Creek. He has driven heavy equipment through Grave Creek. If you'd like me to share those with you sometime, I'll be more than happy to. So as far as being a steward of the environment, he is not, and he is very abusive of that area. So again, if you want my pictures, let me know. I'll be glad to share them. Thank you.
Okay, Greg, thank you. Number 9 on the list next is Elizabeth Howard, followed by Andreas Bleck. So go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Elizabeth Howard. I'm an attorney at Schwabe, and I do represent the Blecks in this transfer application and other water right matters. I want to just spend my time as an attorney speaking to the issue of whether or not the decision that's being made is lawful or not, and particularly whether the use of habitat mitigation is an authorized mechanism for achieving a net benefit under the consent to injury standard. This issue has been raised by some of the comments previously and again today. And the issue that's being raised is whether or not you can, again, only protect stream flows as opposed to providing habitat mitigation that would be consistent with the purposes of the in-stream water right. The view that's being promoted is that the statute only allows the protection of stream flows. That view, I believe, is not consistent with ORS 540, 530, or as Danette pointed out earlier, the ORS 537, 336, which is the statute that talks about the creation of in-stream water rights. Nor is it really consistent with the in-stream water right that's protected under Certificate 72-697. The purpose of this in-stream water right is not, as is being contended by some commenters, simply to ensure water be present in the stream. Rather, the purpose is to provide stream flows that allow for migration, spawning, egg incubation, fry emergence, and juvenile rearing across the nearly 16-mile reach of the in-stream water right. And I wanted to just point that out because in comparison, we're talking about a 560 foot area within that 16-mile reach that would be impacted. Another way to think about the water that's being protected under the in-stream water right is to say that the purpose of the in-stream water right is to protect anadromous and resident fish habitat. For that is what in-stream flows really are, they're habitat for fish. And they provide the means to accomplish various parts of their life history as spelled out in the certificate. In other words, the in-stream water right is not established for the mere purpose of simply having water present. Rather, they are created for the purpose of supporting fish populations through the protection of in-stream fish habitat. So turning now to the relevant statute, which I mentioned earlier, ORS 540-530, that authorizes ODFW to make a recommendation to the Water Resources Department to consent to injury of the in-stream water right. If a change in the point of diversion, note it doesn't talk about the change in place of use, will result in a net benefit to the resource, and if the change is consistent with the purposes of the in-stream water right, which again are addressed in the certificate, but also in the statute authorizing the creation of in-stream water rights. Here, the resource at issue is the in-stream habitat supporting anadromous fish and resident fish and the fish themselves. So long as the change contemplated by the transfer will provide a net benefit, not just a benefit, but a net benefit to the in-stream habitat and fishery resource, which is a purpose consistent with the water right, it can be approved by the Water Resources Department. The habitat restoration and enhancement that will be secured through the imposition of terms and conditions in the transfer order. So again, note these are enforceable terms. And the resulting certificate will provide more in-stream habitat than is being lost as a result of the reduction of stream flows in the very short 560-foot stretch of Grave Creek that's at issue here. This increase in in-stream habitat will in turn improve the fishery resource for all of the reasons explained by the many fisheries biologists involved in creating the mitigation plan. This approach is consistent with and does satisfy the requirements of ORS 540-530. Equally important, this is the type of win that ORS 540-530's consent injury process was intended to promote. It secures better habitat and enhanced fisheries than would be present without the POD transfer applied for by the BLECs. Thank you very much.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you. Number 10 is next, Andreas Bleck, followed by Dale Johnson.
Good morning. My name is Andreas Blech, and my wife and I are the owners of the property and developers of the Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel Project. We're also the holders of Certificate 3943 and the transfer applicants that we're talking about today. I personally have 20 plus years of experience in agriculture on a family almond ranch in Central California using both gravity and sprinkler irrigation systems. I know how to farm and I know how to manage water effectively. Since I've taken possession and ownership of this property, I'm physically on this Sunny Valley site almost daily, and I plan to continue to see the project to its maturity. When we look at those pictures that were shown earlier of the push-up dam, I've always thought there must be a better way. Building this push-up dam and diversion channel with heavy equipment every spring in the riparian area is inefficient and not the most wildlife fish-friendly method. I thought, boy, I surely can do better. Thus the application to modernize the POD, move it upstream so that we can eliminate the annual work in stream and the riparian area. In our proposal, we use a modern ODFW approved fish screen and underground gravity fed pipeline system. There'll be a meter to measure flow and volume of the water that our current system does not have either, nor can it support a meter due to its design. And by moving the POD upstream, we gain more natural head, an advantage for the system. In our mitigation plan, we will increase the native plant cover, new plantings, as well as invasive vegetation. We will increase the native plant cover with new plantings, as well as remove the invasive vegetation like the old growth blackberry thickets that plague the area in the riparian now. I understand from the fisheries biologists working on the plan that adding large woody structures will also greatly improve the fish habitat. Mitigation work proposed here is in addition to what we have already done and in addition to what is required by other agencies involved in this project. The strong mitigation plan lasts 25 years to ensure that the work done meets or exceeds agency expectations throughout its lifespan and will be a condition of the transfer order and the certificated water right that will be issued once the transfer order requirements are met. Adaptive management is crucial with this mitigation as it is with all the work we do. I realize that conditions change and that we want to adapt to those changes so that as a partner with the agencies, we can be good stewards of the resources that we're entrusted with. Most importantly, we have an open door policy with the agencies, and we invite visits when needed to either inspect work currently being done, work completed, or working on changing the plan should the need arise. We want everyone to be satisfied with that we have met the intended outcomes. In closing, I'd like to say that I'm not a biologist, but rather a landowner looking to do a better job, to be a better steward of the natural resources. I look forward to making these improvements to the fish habitat and water delivery system on our property. It's obvious that it will be an upgrade for everyone involved. I look forward to working with the agencies to implement these benefits as we move through the transfer of the POD upgrade process. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Number 11 on the list is Dale Johnson is next, followed by Steve Roos.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My name is Dale Johnson, and I am an environmental consultant. I have over 40 years of experience in fisheries management and 35 years of experience with the federal government. I worked as the district fish biologist for the Bureau of Land Management for 23 years in the Rogue River Basin. I began working with Mr. Bleck on the Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel project in 2013. I'm here today to support the consent to injury recommendation from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife associated with the water right transfer requested by Mr. Bleck. My opinion as a fisheries biologist is that the trade-off of a decreased flow in 560 feet of stream is well worth the proposed enhancement of in-stream riparian habitat presented in the mitigation plan and the consent to injury recommendation. Large woody debris and stream bank structures and protection of the riparian area will ensure large woody debris recruitment. These types of fish habitat enhancement projects are very costly and difficult to find sponsors. This is a very good opportunity from a fishery standpoint. The decrease in summer flows related to moving the point of diversion upstream 560 feet would remain adequate for fish survival, and combined with the habitat enhancement would increase fish survival and production. Government agencies and timber companies have spent millions of dollars to add large woody debris to streams for over the last 50 years. In my experience, juvenile salmon and steelhead typically are limited by a lack of in-stream habitat. Typically, fish are limited by the lack of cover. Covers such as large woody debris and stream bank structures are more important than food in the winter. Flow is important, yet cover is more important to avoid predation and competition for food and to escape winter high flows. Adequate cover, such as large woody debris and stream bank cover, combined with an adequate food supply, which typically is insufficient in a stream, or excuse me, is sufficient in a stream like Gray Creek, is a priority for fish. This is especially true for young fish. There are abundant research and management projects which show an increase in fish populations from addition of large woody debris. Also, Mr. Bleck's efforts to provide long-term monitoring of mitigation efforts would immensely benefit his adaptive management approach. This allows for feedback from monitoring to determine possible adjustments to mitigation. In my opinion, the mitigation plan presented by Mr. Bleck and the supporting ODFW's consent to injury will provide a net benefit to salmon and steelhead because of the proposed fish habitat projects. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. Next on the list is number 12, Steve Roos, will be followed by George Baxter.
Right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, great. This is Steve Rouse. I'm the president of Rogue Advocates. We're a land use advocacy group in Southern Oregon, and we've been participating in the land use applications and other applications related to this mining proposal since the beginning. I also work with the Applegate Watershed Council, so I'm very familiar with the habitat restoration that ODFW is addressing and proposed. And I know the staff down here at ODFW, they're very competent. So I have a lot of respect for them, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm going to address 4 points, but I'll just make 2 real quick. In the habitat mitigation that is proposed by ODFW, items 3 and 4, item 3 being restoring the existing diversion dam, and number 4, increasing plant cover. Those issues are part of the conditions of the land use. Those are already conditions, and they really, I don't think, should be included as a new net benefit consideration because they are already a requirement. The other 2 issues I'd like to address on the preliminary determination, number 15, item 15, which is the proposed change in the character of the use, which relates to the OAR addressing the consent to injury of in-stream water rights. That's really the subject of this whole conversation. So the transfer application proposes 3 distinct transfers. One is the point of diversion, one is the place of the use, and the other is the character of the use. Now, ODFW, in their evaluation, they've certainly addressed the point of diversion, and so has everybody else on this call. But in reading their consent to injury mitigation plan, there is no reference or analysis at all of the change in the character of use. So if we go to the OAR 690-380-5050, specifically 3C, 3 provides the basically the criteria that the agency needs to consider and include. One is the description of the extent of the injury. One is the effect of the injury on the resource. And the third, which is what I want to address, is, and I'll just quote it, an evaluation of the net benefit that will occur as a result of the proposed change that includes an analysis of the cumulative impact of previously approved changes that injured the in-stream water right. Now, there's 3 distinct transfers that are taking place here, and I have not seen a cumulative analysis that considers all 3 impacts. The ODFW mitigation is clearly focused on moving the point of diversion upstream and proposes habitat restoration projects in the affected reach. The evaluation by ODFW and the net benefit analysis fails entirely to describe the extent and effect the change in the character of use, changing from agriculture to mining, will have on the injury. And ODFW does not include an analysis of the cumulative impacts as required by the OAR to address how the character of that mine use will affect the specific stream reach. And I realize that this mining application is very complex. Probably the stack of papers goes from the floor to the ceiling in Mr. Bleck's office. Most common mine uses adjacent to streams are usually concerned with sedimentation and turbidity impacts on the water quality of the streams. And that certainly is an impact and concern in this application. What the analysis failed to address in their consent to injure analysis is the direct impact on the water quantity and stream flow, not just moving the point of diversion. The applicant intends to excavate a series of 70 to 80 foot deep pits, as you've heard, which are just outside the floodplain and just outside the riparian setback of Graves Creek along this 565 foot section. In considering the cumulative analysis, I think the agency also needs to consider OAR 690.
Steve, you have about 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Okay. Well, OAR 690-009-0040 addresses groundwater interference with surface water. And WRD has concluded in several of the previous applications that there is a hydraulic connection and the potential for substantial interference. The effects between groundwater and surface water needs to be considered in the consent to injury analysis by ODFW. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Steve, thank you. Next on the list is George Baxter, followed by Richard Emmons. George Baxter. Deirdre, is it possible that George Baxter hasn't joined us today?
It looks like that way, yes.
Okay.
Unless, George, if you're on the phone, if you could please let us know the last 4 digits of the phone that you're currently using.
Well, we'll move ahead. I'll try to remember to loop back and see if George is with us after we get done. So next on the list, number 14, Richard Emmons, followed by William, then Elizabeth Corcoran. So Richard, please go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Emmons, and I appreciate this opportunity to comment on the consent to injury recommendation. I am and have been a resident of Josephine County for over 22 years. And I've been friends with the Black family for 10 of those years. So I'm commenting today in support of the CTI recommendation. I have reviewed the CTI, and it did go into great detail, prepared by experts. And it appears on paper that this mitigation plan will work, and it will be a net benefit to the wildlife in the area. One of the previous commentators said that it sounds good on paper, and I agree with that person. I had the opportunity on Wednesday to visit the actual site. Andreas Black asked me, well, actually I asked him, could I go out to Sunny Valley and actually look at Graves Creek? I had that opportunity, and I don't believe the other commenters have had that opportunity, at least recently this spring. For me, it was on Wednesday. Andreas took me to the site of the Diversion Dam, and he explained to me how each spring this dam has to be created and how they create it, and how they would take an excavator right up to the edge of the creek and then lift large boulders and the smaller boulders in place. And then by hand, Andreas and his crew would then set smaller rocks and sediment to make this diversion dam. And I asked him, I go, man, that sounds like a lot of work. And he said, well, that's just how you do it if you want to do it right and you want to minimize the impact to the fish. He said, you could have done it with a bulldozer and it'd be a lot faster, but that's not how he did it. Then he showed me the diversion channel that would take the water that they get under that water right. And he explained how that would go away when this has been approved and has been implemented. So you get rid of that ditch that has to be dug out and refilled every year right in the riparian area. You eliminate that diversion dam that can divert fish as well as water. As well made as it is, it can divert fish. Fish can get trapped in little pockets of water and get cut off in the coyote holes and other places where this can happen. And it does affect the fish. He showed me the area that's going to be cleared of all the invasive brush, all the blackberries and other things that prevent wildlife from walking there, from being a part of that. He also showed me where the intake is going to be 560 feet up and how it's going to go underneath the creek, and it's going to be completely safe to the fish so that no fish could get sucked in and lost. He also showed me where the meter is going to go so they can precisely meter exactly how much water is being diverted under the water right for this operation. It's very precise. It's very well planned out. It's an excellent plan. It is going to be better for the fish. It's going to be better for the wildlife that creeps up to the edge of Grave Creek. It's also going to be better for the people because by doing gravity fed, you don't need to use pumps and other methods to pump water, and you don't have to create that ditch every spring and kind of tear up the ground in order to get the water that they have under their water right. So I'm speaking today to say that this is a net benefit for the fish and the wildlife, for the stream. It is a well-planned project. The mitigation will be monitored for 25 years, and it will be monitored by the effective departments in Oregon. Another commenter said, who funds this project? That's one of the beautiful aspects of this, is that the riparian area gets to be improved for the wildlife. The creek gets improved for the fish, and this is all done at the expense of the owner of the property. No taxpayer money is necessary, and 560 feet out of the total length may not be that much, but it's almost 2 football fields of Grave Creek are going to be improved for the fish and the wildlife. It'll be a much better place to live for those fish, and it will be a long-term benefit to the area. So in conclusion, I've known Andreas Black for 10 years. He takes the long view. He wants to do something that he can explain to his children and his grandchildren. He did the right thing. He did it the right way, and he protected the fish and the wildlife in this area. So I want to encourage you to go forward with this consent to injury recommendation, move this project along. I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Richard. Next on the list is number 15, William Corcoran, followed by Elizabeth Corcoran.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My name is William Corcoran. I live directly adjacent to Sunny Valley Sand and Gravel Project. I'm to the west of it. We have a common line. Graves Creek runs across my land, and I have 1874 water rights on Graves Creek for pasture irrigation. I just want to address that I've purchased my property in 1979 and have been in this valley since then. And I'm just a simple common sense person that lives their life. And to watch wildlife, I've seen it over the years. And we used to have an elk herd on our land. It no longer exists. It's disappeared. I've watched Graves Creek be stressed over the years, and this year is completely stressed out. I have watched the habitat, the fish, and the wildlife be stressed in the area. Additional use and additional access to Graves Creek and pulling water out of it is just going to stress the wildlife even more. I am very concerned about the creek being able to handle this use. The water right that Mr. Black uses really hasn't been over the 40-some years used extensively. And so the additional consistent use for his project will affect the creek tremendously. I feel that once, if it does get approved, there's no turning back. Once it's done, it's done. And once we realize that there's an impact, how do we fix it? It just is be too late to fix it. So I'm against this this transfer, and I thank you for your time.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Corcoran, and I live just
Elizabeth, just a second before you start, I just want to help folks know that they're coming up after you. So this next speaker is Elizabeth Corcoran, followed by Cindy Henry at number 17.
Cindy Henry.
So go ahead, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I live just with my husband just west of Black, and we have a water right. It's 1874, volume 4, page 1. Lisa Brown and Steve Rouse have addressed most of our concerns. Water flow is our largest concern, and water quality. We feel it will affect our water right. The water has dwindled on that creek over the years, and it can be documented by the water master would serve us a notice saying that the water usage is shut down on this creek for very low flow. That happened to us several times over the years, and it continually is lower and lower. We notice it has affected the water and the quality and the actual wildlife, the fish that come up. And even though Mr. Black would be putting up a habitat, if the fish can't get to the habitat has no use. And you have to have water flow down creek to be able to have the fish come up to use it. To me, water flow and water quality are pretty much linked, and that's common sense. It has not been demonstrated to us that there will be no injury to us, and we strongly show that the change will affect our water right, and that is our biggest concern. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Next on the list, number 17, Cindy Henry, followed by Joe Boyer. So Cindy, take it away, please. Let's see, I can't hear Cindy. Is that you?
Yes, this is Cindy Henry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Cindy Henry, and I live in the 1,500-foot impact area of this project. And I moved to Sunny Valley in 1991. It's a beautiful rural community. A lot of nice people live here. And I live on a tributary into Grave Creek, Tommy's Creek, which is west of this habitat that's going to be created. And when I first moved here, we used to see salmon in Tommy's Creek all the time, swimming up. And over the years, we don't see that anymore. The creek is dry, Tommy's Creek, and I'm actually taking water out of my well to put buckets of water out for the wildlife on the property. I might have to pour some into the creek for the fish too. So I am concerned about this because this would let the water in the temperature, because there is no water coming from Tommy's Creek. And of course, Grave Creek feeds into the famous Rogue River. So there's concern for the fish, the wildlife. There's eagle and the deer, and there's no water for them, let alone for the people that live in the community. So a lot of the comments have addressed my concerns too, and we hope that you really look at this closely. And thank you for the opportunity to comment on this. And I think it's a very good idea. I'm actually astonished if you've seen the creek as it is. We've been in drought for several years. So thank you very much.
Okay, Cindy, thank you. Next is number 18, Joe Boyer, and after that, Carolyn McNamara.
And this is Cindy. Thank you for overseeing this and doing your best to protect the creeks in this pristine area.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I want to make sure we've got Joe Boyer next. So Joe Boyer, I haven't heard you yet. Deirdre, is it possible that Joe Boyer isn't with us today?
Yes, he's here.
Oh, okay. Great. Go ahead, Joe.
Can you hear him?
Well, I'm getting quite a bit of feedback. I wonder if you have two different phones on, or if your speaker is on. Okay. Go ahead, Joe. We'll give it a try.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, sounds much
Evidently you
better.
can. All right, my name is Joe Boyer. I'm a close neighbor, right upstream from the Sunny Gravel mining pits. The transfer of water rights from agriculture to mining, to my knowledge, has not been approved. It looks like the application is for doing some watering of his garden, which was about 1 acre of land. And they're transferring that to filling water pits or gravel pits, about 8 of them, about 100 acres of that. That's going to be millions of gallons of water. The area that we're talking about is in a canyon. Grave Creek is in a canyon, which goes from about 2,200 foot elevation down to an 800 foot elevation where it meets the Rogue River. The Rogue River is a major tributary for the salmon. When the salmon come up into the upper Rogue River, the first tributary that they meet is Grave Creek. That is their closest contact with upstream cold stream water. That would be their best habitat. Excuse me. As they go further into the Rogue River, they have to go many miles to get to other habitat. Southern Oregon is in a drought. We've been in a drought for years now. My water has been discontinued for 6 years in a row. My well is only 15 feet deep. The deep pits that they are planning on digging will drain my well. The area that they're looking to do their digging and their point of diversion is right at the base of Tom East Creek. Tom East Creek is the outflow of Greenback Mine, Columbia Mine, and some of the other mines that are in the area. It's contaminated with mercury, and that mercury will be collecting right about where they're doing their digging. That's also where the gold is probably at. They haven't addressed the fact that they need to have about a $3 million bridge and road going up the mountain so that they can even access their property. That's going to be destroying the Indian trails. We got Indian burial grounds because the Tacoma Indians lived there for 8,000 years. It's been inhabited by Americans since 1846, where it was the first pioneers. It's been zoned RR5 for many, many years and was only recently spot zoned by our commissioners for this one purpose, to allow this to be a gravel pit. However, the gravel is worthless because it has a lot of contamination in it, and in the rock. Let them dig right in that hole. The best place to have a habitat for the salmon would be in Grave Creek because it's the closest cold water. In Southern Oregon, we're on fire. All of the tributaries going into Rogue River are contaminated with the chemicals from the fire, and all of the watershed I consider endangered. We also have a great influx of people who want to raise various crops like hemp and pot. They use a lot of water. They're going to be taking their water out of the aquifers.
Okay, Joe, you have 30 seconds
fed
left.
by the creek.
30 seconds left, Joe.
So thank you. If you allow this to happen, you're going to be opening the floodgates for all of the hemp and the pot people to say, hey, I want my water rights too. So if you want to open up a system where everybody's going to be going to court and fighting for their water rights, you're just going to do it by allowing this to happen. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you get rid of this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. That was number 18, Joe Boyer. Next on the list is Carolyn McNamara, and then Steve McNamara at number 20.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My name is Carolyn McNamara, and I just want to say that a prior statement mentioning that other commenters should visit the area to see the creek.
Carolyn, I wonder, are there a couple microphones going on there? I wonder if you and Steve both have a phone going, because there's quite a bit of feedback.
Negative on that.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, go ahead, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to mention that a prior statement was made that commenters should visit the area. Well, most commenters live in sight of the creek, and they basically live the process. So I strongly oppose the transfer of water rights from irrigation to mining, and I oppose the change of location of the point of diversion. And water is life. Hope it doesn't affect ours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Number 20 is Steve McNamara, and then Nancy Rodine.
Good morning. My name is Steve McNamara, and I live in beautiful and historic Sunny Valley. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. I also want to bear witness to the tributaries, and one in particular, Brimstone Creek, that feeds Graves Creek, for the last 7 years has been running, and that's a class A classified stream. It's barely a trickle these days. The rain amount and the water flow have changed in the last 7 years, and I know it's also true on the Palm East Creek. If you hike around and see the different tributaries, I know it's the end of the summer, but even in the fall and in the spring, they've been running really low. And it just stands to reason that if the tributaries are low that feed Graves Creek, that the amount that's proposed to take out of Graves Creek is going to have a much bigger impact. But that's just one thing. I am opposed to the transfer of the water resources from Graves Creek to mining. Water is life. Water makes life possible. Mining makes profit possible. Reducing water flow at proposed levels, even with said improvements, is asking nature to overcome too many obstacles, and it puts the health and the well-being of Graves Creek and its community at risk Please deny the change from agriculture to mining. Please side with nature and the residents of Graves Creek, not a profit-making scheme. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this. Thank you. Hello?
Dwight, you're muted again.
You'd think after a couple hours I would have this all figured out and smooth. So thanks for your patience. Next on the list is Nancy Rodine and then Jim Rodine.
Oh.
So Nancy, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. That sounds good.
Oh, good. Jim will not be speaking today. And my name is Nancy Rodine, a 30-year resident of Sunny Valley. I want to add to what Steve Rouse's point was that the ODF really needs to consider the use to which this water will be put. That the mining process degrades the water greatly. The amount of clay in the material that the mine will be processing is going to be a slurry that will be added to those deep reservoirs. And with the hydrology connection with the creek, there's going to be a degrading of the quality of the water in Grave Creek. And I don't think that ODF has considered that adequately. Another issue is there is a great deal of serpentine rock on that location. And my husband, a geologist, submitted a report talking about the amount of crystalline asbestos that's contained in the samples that we had tested. And it is a toxic substance. 4 times the state limit is the amount that we found contained. And so when this is crushed and stockpiled, that contaminant will probably end up as runoff into Grave Creek, which could greatly affect the little tiny salmon larvae. So I don't know if that's been discussed or studied by ODFW biologists, but probably should be. So I want to thank you. Consider the degradation of the water that would be processed through the Black plant. And thank you for letting me make this comment.
You're still muted, Dwight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I was off and then went back on mute. But okay, since we don't have Jim Rodine with us, Lisa Bowie is next. And then I'm going to see if George Baxter is with us by chance. So Lisa, please go ahead. Let's see. I don't see a phone number on my list for Lisa. Lisa Bowie, or maybe it's Bo. Deirdre, is it possible that she's not with us today?
It's possible she's not with us unless her 4 last digits of the phone number is 5592.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you what, if your phone number ends in 5592, would you go off mute and let us know who you are, just so I make sure I'm not missing somebody. All right. So let's see. Doesn't sound like Lisa Bowie is with us. One more check for George Baxter. I'm not sure who's was speaking there. Oh, that looks like it was Deborah and Steve Lawwill.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
This is Lisa Bowe.
Okay, great. All right, good. I didn't want to miss anybody, and I can we can hear you good. You're coming in loud and clear. So please go ahead with your comments.
Okay. Okay, my name's Lisa Bowe. I do live off of one of the tributaries to Grave Creek. We've only been here 3 years. However, we've seen a huge impact, and the water quality and the water is practically null and void. Now, we keep talking about the riparian area and the fish habitat, which, like Steve Rouse had mentioned, I'm not sure why we keep talking about that, because that is already on one of the stipulations for the land use. My concern is a couple of people that are in favor of the mine keep talking about how this is going to benefit the community. I'm not sure how it's going to benefit our quality, our water rights. I guess I'm not understanding if what's going to happen with those that have senior water rights downriver from him when he's pulling out thousands and thousands of gallons of water. And with, I'm just sickened by the whole thing. Maybe I don't understand it. It just sounds like a total Aaron Brockovich scenario here, since we've all seen, since he is from Central California, what happens when large companies come in and start using the water. What happens to the little folks and the small farms? I mean, they're all dried up because of the water we haven't had and the rainfall. And like Nancy Rodine had mentioned, what about all the slurry and the asbestos and the crystals and things end up in the water? And I guess I just would like to know what is going to happen to our groundwater. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And so, Lisa, you were last but not least on our list. But I want to see if by chance George Baxter has joined us. Phone number ending in 1099. Deirdre, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't see George on our list here.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to thank you all for your comments. I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa to wrap us up if there's anything left on our agenda.
All right.
Hi, this is George Baxter. Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay. George.
Hi, this is George Baxter. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. I wonder why we weren't
good.
able to hear you before, but we can hear you fine now. So,
All right.
Please go ahead with your comments.
All right, thank you. I'm a resident of Sunny Valley, and obviously we look around and we see what's happening in our nature. That is, we, of the last 5 years, 3 have been in extreme drought conditions. And so we see the flow of Grave Creek greatly deplenished. And so my comment is, why would we be taking more water out of Grave Creek when there's already low flow to begin with? And our drought may continue for several more years, even decades. So we have to be real careful. Water is such a valuable resource. I see no reason, and I would oppose any additional water taken out of Grave Creek. Thank you.
Okay, George, thank you, and thank you for joining us. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa to continue with the agenda.
Okay, bear with me, folks. Okay, so that this brings us to the end of the public meeting. So I just want to thank you all for providing your comments and sharing your thoughts and concerns with us. And so the next thing that's going to be happening is these oral public comments, and then also the written comments we received in response to the consent to injury recommendation public notice. Those are all going to be considered by ODFW, and then once they let us know if the recommendation is going to be withdrawn or altered or remain the same, then it comes back to Water Resources so we can move forward in our process to either approve or deny the application. So again, I want to just remind you, at some point in the future, we'll be issuing a new preliminary determination, and there's an opportunity to protest that. So thank you all. Appreciate you being here, and have a great rest of your Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your comments as well.